The lobby of the Blackwood Surgical Center was a sickening display of wealth. It wasn't a hospital, it was a museum of ego. Crystal chandeliers, marble imported from Carrara, and paintings on the walls that cost more than a small country's annual health budget. In the middle of this opulence stood Dr. Elias Reed, a 28-year-old surgical prodigy in a tattered lab coat. He was the son of a poor janitor who had died in this very building when it was still a community clinic, because he couldn't afford the treatment the Blackwood family now charging billions for. Elias wasn't here to admire the art. He was here for an audition, Project Lazarus. Project Lazarus was the brainchild of Arthur Blackwood, the billionaire owner of the hospital. It was a revolutionary, non-invasive robotic surgical method designed to treat incurable spinal injuries without leaving a single scar. It promised to make Arthur the god of medicine, not just its king. The catch? Arthur couldn't actually perform it. He was a businessman, not a healer. He needed the best hands in the world to become the interface. "We need genius, Dr. Reed, not sentiment," Arthur sneered, looking up from his golden-crusted desk. He was a man with cold, calculating eyes, and a suit that cost more than a year's worth of a nurse's salary. "Your resume is impressive, but you're from a common background. You're a risk. This technology needs perfection." "Perfection, Mr. Blackwood, is born from need, not greed," Elias said softly. "My people, the ones who can't afford your crystals, die from these injuries. I will make this work because it has to work, not because it makes a profit." Arthur Blackwood laughed. It was a dry, chilling sound. "You're dramatic, I'll give you that. We'll start tomorrow. Show me this genius you speak of, not your morals. If you succeed, this hospital, this technology, it all becomes yours. If you fail, I will blacklist you from every hospital in the country." Elias was too focused on the technology to care about the threat. He began his work. For 6 months, Elias didn't leave the Blackwood Center. He spent his nights in the lab, sleeping only a few hours. He became a ghost, existing only in the light of the robotic surgical arms. Project Lazarus was indeed revolutionary. The robotic sensors were so sensitive they could feel a change in air pressure. The artificial intelligence, the Lazarus core, was a symmetrical masterpiece, a digital twin of Elias's own surgical intuition. He wrote the language the robotic hands spoke. He spent thousands of hours training the core, not just in surgery, but in empathy. He wanted it to prioritize the patient, not the profit margin. The launch day was a global event. The elite of the world were watching. A 9-year-old girl named Mia, whose family couldn't afford a single stitch at Blackwood, had been chosen for the debut. Arthur wanted a pure poverty-to-power narrative to sell his new technology. The operation began. Elias stood on the platform, his hands inserted into the haptic gloves. His gaze was fierce. He wasn't just performing surgery. He was fighting for the life of every poor person who had been rejected by Arthur Blackwood. The Lazarus core moved with an ethereal grace. The monitors showed a flawless, bloodless journey through the delicate nerves of the spine. Arthur Blackwood watched from the viewing gallery, his eyes gleaming with the greedy light of potential billions. "Flawless," a journalist whispered. "This will change the world." Elias knew it would change the world, but he also knew Arthur. The final step of the procedure required a final, high-voltage neural pulse to activate the repair cells. It was a delicate procedure, one only Elias could handle with precision. As Elias went to administer the pulse, the power in the lab suddenly surged. Not a natural surge, but a focused, controlled burst. He screamed. A massive electrical shock traveled from the robotic arm, up the haptic glove, and directly into Elias's hands. The Lazarus core registered a catastrophic error. The alarm screamed, but not for the patient. The core, sensing the greedish, unauthorized intent that had caused the surge, locked the controls. The final pulse was never administered. Arthur Blackwood's miracle had just become a nightmare. Elias was dragged out of the haptic gloves, his hands trembling and smoking, label a cyber terrorist. Julian Vane stood behind him, his face a mask of false concern. "I tried to stop him," Arthur announced into the microphone, his voice dripping with synthesized sorrow. "I had no idea he was selling our encryption keys to a foreign cartel on the dark web. It breaks my heart." Elias was dragged out in handcuffs, confused and screaming, labeled a cyber terrorist. Julian had wiped all traces of Elias from Ether Dynamics. He presented Project Icarus to the world as his own, receiving the standing ovations that belonged to Elias. Elias was sentenced to 10 years in a maximum security prison, his name added to every global cyber blacklist. In the digital age, being blacklisted was worse than death. It was erasure. But Arthur made one critical mistake. He forgot that a true coder doesn't need a keyboard to write code. Sign it. Prison was a digital pariah for Elias. He was blacklisted from touching any device more advanced than a calculator. While Julian Vane was gracing the covers of business magazines, hailed as the savior of data, Elias was cleaning prison toilets, labeled a digital pariah. Julian's ego had blinded him. He hadn't just stolen the code, he had expanded Project Icarus into every facet of digital life. Governments used it for intelligence, banks used it for transactions, and average citizens used it for their digital footprints. The more powerful Julian became, the more fragile his digital foundation was, and Elias knew exactly where to strike. After 7 years of silent mental construction, Elias was released on parole. He was rehabilitated, but still blacklisted. No bank account, no phone, no identity. He was a non-person. Julian Vane thought he had successfully deleted Elias. He had no idea he had just activated his own expiration date. The flaw wasn't in the code, Julian. It was in the thief. You can steal a vision, but you can't steal the truth. Icarus is not falling. He is waking up.